What if the love of your life vanished and took your future with her? 6 years after a painful breakup, a powerful CEO crosses paths with a mysterious little girl, one who unknowingly holds the key to a past he never understood. What follows is a story of betrayal, redemption, and a second chance that no one saw coming. But some truths are buried for a reason, and digging them up might change everything. Don't miss this emotional roller coaster of love, loss, and the fight to put a broken family back together. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single moment, only on our YouTube channel. Sophie wandered through the grand hall of the art gallery, her small hand brushing the smooth wall as she followed the swirl of colors and soft murmurs. The evening was filled with polished shoes, clinking glasses, and adults speaking in tones too serious for a child. At just 6 years old, she shouldn't have been in the VIP section, but curiosity was a stubborn little thing, and Sophie had always been curious. She slipped through an open doorway, ducking behind a velvet curtain that separated the general exhibit from the private collection. Inside, the room was quiet, lit by soft gallery lights that gave everything a dreamy glow. Paintings lined the walls, bold strokes, abstract emotion, but Sophie didn't pay them much attention. She was too busy spinning in slow circles, arms out, pretending she was in her own secret world. Then she bumped into someone. Oof! A hand steadied her gently by the shoulders. She looked up, way up into the face of a tall man in a charcoal suit. He had striking gray eyes, sharp cheekbones, and a surprised look that quickly softened into something unreadable. "I'm so sorry," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian Vale looked down at the little girl with furrowed brows. She had a round face framed by loose dark curls, and those eyes were hauntingly familiar. Wide, expressive, with flecks of hazel and green just like. He knelt slowly to meet her gaze, forgetting for a moment that he was the most powerful man in the room. "Are you all right?" Sophie nodded quickly, then glanced over her shoulder as if she'd been caught in a place she didn't belong. "Do you like paintings?" he asked, his voice gentler than usual. "I like the colors," she said simply. Then, in a flash of awareness, she gave a polite little curtsy like her mother had taught her and turned to leave. As she disappeared through the curtain, a woman came into view from the hallway. She looked distracted, searching, until her eyes locked on the retreating girl. Adrian saw her too and froze. Maya. His heart gave a hard, involuntary jolt. She hadn't changed much. Older, maybe, softer around the edges, but still her. The girl ran up to her and reached for her hand. The woman bent down, whispering something to the child, then turned, and for the briefest second her eyes met Adrian's. Shock, recognition, then nothing. She looked away and walked off, holding the little girl's hand. Adrian remained still, breath caught somewhere between past and present, trying to understand what just happened, and why that little girl's eyes looked so much like his. Adrian remained frozen, his eyes fixed on the retreating silhouettes of the woman and the child. The air in the gallery felt suddenly thinner, the ambient chatter muffled beneath the sharp pounding in his chest. He didn't move until they had disappeared entirely from view. Maya. He whispered her name in his mind as if saying it aloud might shatter something. It had been 6 years since he last saw her, 6 years since that final argument, the slammed door, the message that ended it all. She hadn't just walked out of his life, she had vanished. No calls, no emails, no trace. And yet here she was, standing mere feet away just moments ago, holding the hand of a little girl who looked unmistakably like. He ran a hand down his face, trying to push the thought aside, but it clung to him like fog. Could it be? Was that little girl? Adrian straightened, his mind racing. He turned to look toward the direction they had gone, but saw only the fatting trail of a crowd. People moved in slow waves around the exhibits, oblivious to the storm suddenly raging inside him. A waiter passed by, offering champagne. Adrian waved him off with a tense shake of the head. Instead, he walked over to the edge of the VIP section, eyes scanning the gallery's main floor. No sign of Maya, no sign of the girl. 6 years, he thought, and she never told me she had a child, never even hinted at it. That can't be a coincidence. He took out his phone, opened a contact search, hovered his thumb over her name, Maya Lin. The number was still there, untouched since the day she left. He stared at it for a long moment, then locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. This wasn't a conversation for tonight, not here. But it would happen soon. Because if there was even the slightest chance that the little girl with those hauntingly familiar eyes was his daughter, Adrian Vale needed to know. That night, sleep evaded Adrian completely. He lay in the dim glow of his penthouse bedroom, city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shifting patterns on the ceiling. But his eyes never closed. Every time he tried, all he could see were those eyes. Wide, curious, soft with wonder, so achingly familiar they'd etched themselves into his mind like a memory he didn't know he had. Was it really her? Was that really Maya? And the girl, Sophie, the name rang in his ears every time he replayed the brief conversation. Adrian sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and exhaled deeply. It had been years since he'd let emotion gnaw at him like this. Business, strategy, expansion, those were the things that kept him anchored. But tonight they felt distant, hollow. He crossed the room, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and stood by the window. Somewhere out there, Maya had been living a life completely separate from his. And that little girl, what if she wasn't just a coincidence? What if she was the reason Maya had disappeared so completely? Adrian didn't like guessing. He dealt in facts, in certainty. So he did what he always did when something unsettled him. He took control. He picked up his phone and dialed a private number. It rang once. "Mr. Vale," a voice answered promptly. "What do you need?" "I need information," Adrian said, staring out at the skyline. "A woman named Maya Lin. She was at the Hollies Gallery tonight. I want her address, her current occupation, everything." There was a short pause. "And the girl she was with?" "Yes," Adrian said quietly, "especially the girl." He hung up and let the silence settle again. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual energy. But inside Adrian Vale's mind, a different current had been set in motion, one he couldn't ignore. He needed answers, and this time he wouldn't rest until he had them. The report came the next morning, faster than expected. Adrian sat in his private office, the file laid out before him like a wound waiting to be opened. He read it slowly at first, scanning for anything that could confirm or deny the growing suspicion in his chest. Then he saw it. Full name, Sophie Lynn Vale. His hands froze. Vale, she gave her the name. His eyes moved down the page. Birth certificate, mother, Maya Lin. Father, blank. No listed guardian aside from Maya, no legal connection to him. But the rest of the file, photos, school records, medical documents, painted a different story. She was born roughly 8 months after their breakup. The timelines aligned too perfectly to ignore. Her birthday, the resemblance, her love for art just like Maya, her eyes unmistakably his. Adrian leaned back in his chair, unable to breathe for a moment. A strange, raw heat rose in his chest, not just confusion, not just disbelief, something sharper, something that burned. She didn't tell me. For 6 years, Maya had kept this from him. She raised a child, his child, without a word, without a hint. He wasn't given a choice, wasn't even granted knowledge of her existence. He stood up abruptly, knocking the chair back, and walked to the window as if the view of the city could steady him. But nothing about this moment was steady. The walls felt too close, his thoughts too loud. Why would she hide this? Why would she keep Sophie from him? And yet beneath the anger something deeper stirred. A hollow ache, one he didn't know he was capable of feeling. He thought of all the missed birthdays, the drawings he never saw, the scraped knees he never bandaged, the bedtime stories he never read. He had a daughter, and he never even knew. For a man who had everything, power, wealth, control, it was the most devastating realization of all. Adrian didn't wait. The moment he had Maya's address, he was already in the car, heart pounding like a drum against his ribcage. The city blurred past his window, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. He needed answers, not from a report, not from a file, but from her. When he arrived, the modest brownstone felt a world away from the sharp glass towers he usually occupied. It was warm, lived in, flowers on the balcony, a child's drawing taped to the window. He stared at it for a moment before raising his hand and knocking. The door opened. Maya stood there barefoot, in a soft blue sweater and worn jeans. Her expression hardened the instant she saw him. "You found me," she said flatly, not surprised, just resigned. "We need to talk," Adrian said. She hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. The inside of her home was quiet. A teacup rested half-finished on the table. Toys were neatly tucked into bins, evidence of a life, of a child, of Sophie. Adrian turned to face her. "She's mine." Maya didn't flinch. "You read the report. You could have told me. You could have asked," she shot back. 6 years, Adrian, 6 years of silence. What did you think I was doing, traveling the world with someone else? "I didn't know," he said, struggling to hold on to calm. "If I had." "If you had what?" Her voice rose slightly. "Would you have dropped the deal that made you a billionaire, the one you chose over everything else, including me?" "That's not fair." "No," she snapped. "What wasn't fair was that email you sent, the one that told me to disappear. No explanation, no goodbye, just end it." Adrian stared at her, stunned. "What email?" She blinked, thrown off by his confusion. "Don't act like you didn't write it." "I didn't." His voice was firm. "I never sent anything like that." There was a pause, a subtle shift in her eyes, doubt, confusion, but then the wall returned. "You left. That's what mattered," she said quietly. "You made your choice. I didn't think you wanted to be a father, and I wasn't going to beg you." Adrian stepped closer, his tone softer now. "You were the only person I ever— Maya, I didn't know about Sophie, about any of it." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were tired, guarded, but somewhere beneath it a storm still swirled. "Does it matter now?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. "It matters to me, and it matters to her." Maya walked over to the kitchen table, picking up her tea, though she didn't drink it. She stared into the cup for a moment before speaking, her voice quiet but steady. "You remember the day you left for Zurich?" she asked without looking at him. Adrian nodded slowly. That trip had marked the beginning of the biggest merger in his career, one that launched him into global recognition. He remembered being stressed, focused, running on adrenaline and ambition. "I thought we were going to be okay," Maya continued. "I knew your life was complicated. I knew how much that deal meant to you, but I also thought I mattered too." She finally looked at him, her eyes sharper now. "Until I got your email." Adrian frowned. "What email?" She ignored the question for now. "It came 2 days after you left. It said, word for word, 'This isn't going to work. Don't contact me again. Move on,' just like that. No explanation, no call, just done." Adrian's breath caught. "Maya, I never—" "You don't have to deny it," she cut in. "I stared at that message for hours, thought it was a mistake. I even replied twice. You never responded." "I never saw that message," he said firmly. "I would never have written something like that." But Maya didn't seem convinced. "Maybe you were angry or just done with me. You were already gone before you left, Adrian. You stopped showing up long before the plane ticket." She sat down now, her voice softer. "I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. I wanted to tell you, I really did, but after that email, What was I supposed to think? You wanted out. He stepped closer, the weight of her words settling heavy in his chest. I would have been there, he said, almost to himself, if I'd known. Maya looked at him, eyes guarded. I didn't need you to be there for me, but she deserved a father who actually wanted to be one. They sat in silence for a moment, both haunted by different versions of the same past, and neither quite sure who to blame. Adrian stood still, his mind racing. Everything Maya had just told him sounded surreal, like a scene from someone else's life. But one thing was clear, he had never sent that email. I swear to you, he said slowly, meeting her gaze, I didn't write that. I never ended things that way. Yes, I left for Zurich. Yes, I was distant, but I would never just cut you off like that. Maya gave a short, dry laugh, not out of amusement but disbelief. You expect me to believe that, after 6 years of nothing? I didn't know, Maya, he said, his voice tightening with urgency. That email, someone else must have sent it, maybe someone who... Don't, she interrupted sharply. Don't turn this into a conspiracy. You always did that, deflect, rationalize, turn everything into a puzzle to solve instead of a person to care about. Adrian stepped back slightly, stung. I'm not deflecting. I'm telling you the truth. I never saw your replies because I never sent the damn thing in the first place. Maya stood now too, arms crossed over her chest. Her posture was firm, but her eyes shimmered with a conflict she wasn't ready to voice. It doesn't matter, she said coldly. Whatever did or didn't happen, it's over. Sophie has me, she's safe, she's happy, that's all that matters now. Adrian's jaw tensed. It matters to me. I have a daughter, Maya. You think I can just walk away from that? You already did, she snapped. You just didn't realize it. The room fell into a thick silence. Adrian stared at her, unable to find words strong enough to undo 6 years of silence. Maya turned away, walking to the door and opening it, an unspoken signal that the conversation was over. Good night, Adrian. He hesitated, wanting to say more, to stay, to fight, but she wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. So he left, but as he walked down the front steps, something shifted inside him. Doubt turned into suspicion. If he didn't send that email, then who did? And why? One thing was certain now, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Adrian didn't sleep much after that night. The conversation with Maya haunted him, but it was Sophie's face, her voice, her eyes, that refused to leave his thoughts. He knew better than to try to force his way back into Maya's world. She'd shut that door, and for now it was staying shut. But Sophie, she was a different story. Over the next few weeks, Adrian found himself showing up at places he knew they frequented. The neighborhood park, the Saturday morning farmer's market, the small community library Maya volunteered at. At first, it was purely coincidence for Sophie. To her, he was just a nice man who always seemed to be around when she was coloring or chasing bubbles through the grass. The first real conversation happened over sidewalk chalk. Sophie was kneeling on the pavement outside the library, scribbling a massive sun with long orange rays. Adrian crouched beside her, admiring the drawing. That's a pretty amazing sun, he said. She beamed. Thanks, I made it have extra rays so it can reach everywhere, even the sad places. Adrian smiled, taken aback by her warmth. That's a very important kind of sun. She nodded like a tiny professor. I like drawing. Mommy says I got it from her. She paints real pictures, but I like colors better. From that moment, something began to shift. The more they spoke, the more Adrian saw bits of himself in her, not just in the way she looked, but in her curiosity, her sharpness, her quiet way of observing the world. Soon, Sophie began to expect him. When he appeared at the park, she'd run over, waving. At the market, she'd tug him by the sleeve to show him the strangest-looking fruits. At the library, she'd ask if he wanted to sit and color too. He never told her who he was. Not yet. He didn't want to confuse her or risk upsetting Maya further. So he became Mr. Adrian, or sometimes the man with the funny ties. To Sophie, he was a new friend. To Adrian, she was something he hadn't known he was missing. And every time she smiled at him, it only strengthened one quiet, relentless thought in his mind. I have to make this right. It was a quiet Sunday morning at the park. The sun filtered through the trees, and a breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers. Adrian sat on a bench near the sandbox, a sketchpad balanced on his knee as he absent-mindedly tried to copy Sophie's wild, colorful style. She was crouched beside him on the ground, tongue poking out in concentration, as she drew a house with a crooked roof and a dog with legs far too long. Adrian watched her quietly, his pencil still. He didn't want to interrupt her focus, but something about the moment felt sacred, peaceful, and unfiltered. Then, without looking up, Sophie said, "Mommy cried once when she painted a picture of my dad." Adrian blinked. She did. "Mom?" Sophie added a son in the corner of her drawing. "It was a long time ago. I asked her why she was sad, and she said it was because the picture made her remember things she didn't want to feel." He tried to keep his voice calm. "What kind of picture was it?" "A man," she said simply. "But not like a normal man. He didn't have a face. Mommy said it was easier that way." Adrian's hand went still. Sophie turned to look up at him, her eyes wide and thoughtful. "I think he was my dad." Adrian stared at her, heart tightening in his chest. "Did she tell you that?" "No," Sophie said, shaking her head. "But I think she misses him, even if she says she doesn't." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the distant barking of a dog and the rustle of leaves above them. Adrian swallowed hard. That one innocent comment, "she cried when she painted him," hit deeper than any accusation ever could. Maya was still carrying something, and maybe, just maybe, she hadn't told him the whole story. Not about the email, not about her decision. He looked at Sophie again, this bright, brilliant child, and realized something else. Maya hadn't just left to protect herself. She had left carrying pain she'd never let him see. And someone had made sure that pain stayed buried. For the first time, Adrian felt more than just a desire to reconnect. He felt suspicion, an annoying certainty that what happened 6 years ago hadn't happened by accident. Maya sat at her kitchen table, fingers curled around a cup of tea gone cold. Outside, Sophie was humming to herself as she colored by the window, completely unaware of the storm simmering just beneath her mother's calm exterior. Maya's mind spun in circles. Ever since Adrian reappeared, nothing felt settled. She had spent years building a life with boundaries, walls to keep the past out, to keep her heart safe. But now everything was cracking open again. The way he looked at Sophie, the way Sophie lit up around him, it scared her more than she cared to admit. And then there was the email. His insistence that he never sent it, the genuine confusion in his voice, it had shaken her. She didn't want to believe him, didn't want to risk trusting him again. But part of her, deep down, wondered, what if he's telling the truth? Across the city, Adrian wasn't wondering, he was digging. He'd already turned over every email archive he could access. Personal servers, encrypted backups, nothing in his sent mail. No drafts, no record of the message Maya had received all those years ago. His digital trail was clean, which, in a way, only made things worse. So he went deeper. He contacted Daniel Liu, his old IT security lead from the Zurich merger days. The man was discreet, smart, and owed Adrian more than a few favors. "I need a trace on an email sent from my address," Adrian said over a secure line. "Sometime in late April, 6 years ago." Daniel didn't ask why. Within 2 hours, he had a result. "It wasn't sent from your device," Daniel confirmed. "It came from a proxy IP inside your company network, specifically from the Midtown office. Whoever sent it spoofed your credentials, but the packet signature doesn't match your laptop's ID." Adrian stood in stunned silence. "So someone inside the company sent that email," he said quietly. Looks that way. Probably someone with high-level access to your account, possibly an assistant, maybe someone in the executive team. The pieces began to shift in his mind. He had trusted so many people in those early days, people who had a vested interest in keeping him focused, in cutting off anything that might have distracted him from closing the biggest deal of his life. He clenched his jaw. Whoever had done this hadn't just sabotaged a relationship. They had erased a life he was supposed to be part of. And now, Adrian Vale intended to find out exactly who it was. Adrian didn't waste time. As soon as he had confirmation of the IP source, one name rose to the surface like oil on water: Nathan Reeve. Nathan had been more than just a colleague. He was Adrian's closest friend during those pivotal years, the right hand behind the Vale Empire's rise. Charismatic, sharp, and ruthlessly efficient, Nathan had once claimed he would clear the runway so Adrian could take off. At the time, it sounded like loyalty. Now, Adrian realized just how far that loyalty had gone. He scheduled a private meeting at an old office space the company had since vacated, a place where no one could interrupt them. When Nathan arrived, he looked casual, confident as always, until he saw Adrian's expression. "What's going on?" he asked, adjusting his cufflinks. "You look like you've just seen a ghost." Adrian didn't answer at first. He tossed a printout of the email trace onto the table between them. Nathan glanced at it, then back at Adrian. "What is this?" "You tell me," Adrian said, voice cold. "Because it shows someone in my own company used my credentials to send an email 6 years ago, an email that ended something important." Nathan's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed was louder than any confession. Adrian took a step closer. "Tell me you didn't do it." Still, Nathan said nothing. Adrian's voice dropped. "I trusted you with everything, and you made that decision for me." Finally, Nathan sighed, then leaned back in the chair, a trace of guilt flickering behind his eyes. "You were falling apart," he said quietly. "You couldn't see it, but I could. You were one step away from walking away from the Zurich deal for her, and I knew if you did, everything you'd built, all of it would collapse." "So you decided I didn't deserve a choice," Adrian snapped. "I gave you clarity," Nathan replied. "You needed to let her go, you needed to focus. And look where it got you, global power, top of the game." "At the cost of my daughter," Adrian growled, his hands clenching. "You didn't just take Maya from me, you took Sophie." Nathan hesitated but didn't apologize. "You wouldn't have built what you have if you stayed with her. I did what I thought was best for you." Adrian's voice was low and venomous now. "You thought winning was the only thing that mattered." Nathan shrugged. "Isn't it?" Adrian stepped back, shaking his head slowly. "No, not anymore." For the first time, Nathan looked unsure. Adrian turned toward the door. "We're done." He didn't look back, not once. Because now he knew the truth, and that changed everything. The truth hung over Adrian like a heavy storm cloud long after he walked away from Nathan. Every step he took back to Maya's apartment felt like a reckoning with himself, with the past, with all the years he'd lost because of someone else's decision wrapped in loyalty. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. His future, his family, stolen under the guise of ambition. When he arrived, the sun was dipping low behind the buildings. He stood in front of her door for a long moment before knocking, hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't sure what to expect. Anger, dismissal, silence. The door opened. Maya stood there, wary but calm. "Adrian." "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice firm but not forceful. "Please." She paused, searching his face, then stepped aside. They sat in the living room this time. Sophie wasn't around, perhaps asleep or out with a neighbor, and the house was quiet in a way that made every breath feel louder. Adrian didn't waste time. "You were right," he said. "Someone sent that email, it wasn't me." Her eyes narrowed slightly, guarded. "You're still on that?" I confronted him, Nathan, my former assistant, my best friend. His words felt bitter in his mouth. He admitted it. He sent the email pretending it was from me. Maya's breath caught, but she didn't speak. He thought he was protecting me, thought love would get in the way of my career. He made the decision for me, Maya. He took you from me. He took Sophie. Her expression cracked, just slightly, enough for the pain to resurface. You didn't send it, she whispered, as if testing the truth against her own memories. No, Adrian said, and I would have come back, I would have been there if I had known. He stopped himself, eyes lowering. But I didn't. And that's on me too. I should have fought harder, should have questioned why you disappeared. I let the silence become permanent. Maya turned away, looking toward the hallway where Sophie's bedroom was. Her voice came out soft but trembling. I hated you for so long, and not because you left, but because you didn't try. I know, Adrian said, and you have every right. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. No longer sharp with tension, but thick with things unsaid, and wounds that had never been allowed to heal. I'm not here to rewrite the past, Adrian continued. I just want you to know the truth, all of it, and maybe, someday, you'll let me earn a place in the life I should have never missed. Maya didn't reply right away. But she didn't ask him to leave either. Maya sat still, hands resting in her lap, her gaze unfocused as if she were looking at something far away, something only she could see. Adrian waited, uncertain whether he should say more or remain silent. The truth was out now, but truth didn't automatically erase the years, or the pain, or the quiet nights Maya had spent convincing herself she had made the right decision. After a long pause, she finally spoke, quietly, not bitter but raw. If you had really wanted to find me back then, she turned to him, eyes glassy, maybe everything would have been different. Adrian's mouth opened, but she shook her head gently. I'm not saying that to blame you, she said. It's just when people want to stay, or they fight, or they search. And when you didn't, I thought that was my answer. I didn't know what happened, he replied, voice low. I thought you just left, without a word. I didn't know what to do with that. I waited, she whispered, for weeks. I kept thinking maybe you'd come back or call or at least ask why. I was pregnant, Adrian. I was scared and I was alone and I was angry, but I still waited. A tight silence followed, filled only by the quiet hum of the fridge and the sound of the city outside their window. I used that email to protect myself, she continued, to build a reason not to hope anymore, because hoping you'd change your mind was worse than accepting you were gone. Adrian's shoulders sank. He couldn't argue with that. He had left even if he hadn't meant to stay gone. I'm here now, he said finally, but I know that doesn't undo anything. Maya looked down, her fingers curling slightly into her palms. I don't know what to do with you being here now, she admitted. It's like trying to hold something that doesn't fit in your hands anymore. He nodded. Then don't hold it yet, just don't let go either. Their eyes met again, no longer full of anger but something quieter. Tired perhaps, cautious, but not entirely closed. In the days that followed, Adrian carried Maya's words with him like a quiet weight. If you had really wanted to find me, they echoed in his mind, not with accusation but with truth. He couldn't change what he hadn't done, couldn't erase the years Sophie had grown up without him, but he could choose what came next. That choice became painfully clear when the board summoned him for the final confirmation of his next term as CEO. The room was filled with expectation. 12 people around a polished mahogany table, eyes sharp, voices polite but eager. Adrian Vale had led the company into the stratosphere, and they were prepared to hand him the reins again. More power, more control, more of everything that had defined his life. He walked in dressed in his usual sharp suit, composed as always, but there was a shift in his expression, less steel, more stillness. The chairman began with warm congratulations. We're honored to continue forward under your leadership. The vote was unanimous. It's yours if you'll accept it. Adrian looked around the room. These were people who had trusted him, followed him, revered him. He had everything he once thought he wanted. But he no longer wanted to be a man who could lose everything else for it. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and said simply, "I won't be continuing as CEO." The words dropped like a bomb. Murmurs exploded around the table. Someone asked if it was a joke. Another asked if he was sick. One board member leaned forward with a stunned expression. "Adrian, you're walking away from everything." He smiled faintly. "No, I'm finally walking towards something that matters more." They stared at him in silence, unable to process it. "For years, I built this company like it was the only thing I had. But I've realized there's something I missed, someone I missed, and if I don't change now, I never will." He didn't say Maya's name. He didn't mention Sophie. He didn't need to. He left the room before anyone could talk him out of it, his steps steady, his mind strangely clear. For the first time in years, Adrian Vale wasn't chasing legacy or dominance. He was choosing presence, fatherhood, redemption, something real. The announcement hit the business world like an earthquake. News outlets ran headlines within hours. Adrian Vale steps down as CEO of Vale Holdings. Billionaire walks away from empire, power move, or personal breakdown. The media speculated wildly: health scare, secret merger scandal. But none of them had the story right. Inside Vale Holdings, chaos brewed. Shareholders panicked. Stocks wavered. Executives scrambled to control the narrative. And yet, Adrian remained calm. He agreed to one press conference. No interviews, no media circus, just one moment to speak. The room was packed. Cameras flashed. Reporters called out questions before he'd even stepped on stage. Adrian appeared in a charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves slightly rolled, subtle rebellion against the image they'd known for years. He walked up to the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out at the sea of restless faces. "I know you want answers," he began, voice steady. "I know this decision seems sudden, even reckless, but for me it's not." A hush settled. "I've spent most of my life chasing success, building something I thought would fill the space inside me, and I built it. I won. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of what matters." He paused, letting the silence work. "I'm not abandoning my career," he said slowly. "I'm finding my way back to something more important." Flashbulbs erupted. Reporters murmured, confused. More important than Vale Holdings, than billions. Adrian didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Because this wasn't for them. It was for one little girl with paint-streaked hands. For a woman who used to believe in him. For the version of himself he wanted to become. Not the man on magazine covers, but the man standing quietly in the background of a school recital, proud simply to be there. With nothing left to say, Adrian stepped away from the podium and walked off stage, leaving the world guessing. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't care what they thought. It was a bright, breezy afternoon, the kind that made everything feel softer, slower. The playground behind the small Montessori school buzzed with the energy of little feet running wild, laughter ringing out like music. Adrian stood by the gate, hands in his pockets, his heart pounding in a way it never had during board meetings or billion-dollar deals. He watched as Sophie darted across the play area, a ribbon falling loose from her ponytail, her shoes scuffed, cheeks flushed with joy. She was radiant in motion, fearless and free. He had called ahead, spoken gently to the school director, explained everything. No legal battle, no spectacle. Just a man who wanted to pick up his daughter from school for the very first time. And now here he was, waiting. When Sophie finally spotted him through the fence, she froze for a heartbeat, eyes wide with recognition and surprise. Then her entire face lit up. "Be letter 1ed1 oi." The word pierced the air like a bell, loud, pure, and certain. She ran. Adrian dropped to one knee, arms open, and she launched into his chest with a force that nearly knocked the breath out of him. He held her tightly, stunned by the weight of her trust, by the small, fierce way she clung to him. He didn't even realize he was crying until she pulled back and touched his cheek. "Are you okay?" she asked with a frown. He laughed softly through the tears. "I'm perfect now." Just then Maya arrived at the gate. She had come to pick Sophie up, same as every day, but today everything was different. She stopped in her tracks when she saw them. Sophie curled into Adrian's chest, arms around his neck, grinning like the sun. Their daughter had just called him B-letter-1-ed-1. Maya's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her entire body locked in place as reality shifted around her. Adrian stood slowly, still holding Sophie's hand. Their eyes met across the fence. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. Because in that single, silent moment, Maya saw it all, his decision, his sacrifice, and the undeniable truth that Sophie already knew. He was her father, and he wasn't going anywhere. That evening the city hummed with its usual rhythm, cars passing, lights flickering on one by one, the quiet thrum of life continuing outside apartment windows. But inside Adrian's loft, everything felt still. He sat on the couch, staring out at the skyline, a mug of untouched coffee resting on the table in front of him. The room was warm, quiet, filled with the faint scent of old books and the rain that had just started to fall. Then came the knock. He opened the door and there she was, Maya, standing in the hallway, her coat damp from the drizzle, arms crossed not in defense but in hesitation. "I wasn't sure if I should come," she said softly. "I'm glad you did," he replied, stepping aside to let her in. She moved slowly into the space, glancing around as if seeing it for the first time. It hadn't changed much, sleek, minimalist, carefully composed. But now it felt less like a fortress and more like a quiet, waiting place. They didn't talk at first. They sat side by side on the couch, a cushion of space between them, the silence not awkward but careful. No accusations, no defenses, just two people with too much history between them and too many things that had never been said. Adrian glanced at her, then looked back down at his hands. "She called me Dad today." "I know," Maya murmured. "I heard." He smiled faintly, almost disbelieving. "It was the best moment of my life." Maya didn't answer right away. She stared at the coffee mug in front of her, tracing its rim with her eyes. "She's always wondered," she said. "She'd ask about you sometimes. I never knew what to say." "You did what you thought was right," he said gently. She looked over at him then, really looked. And for the first time in a long time there was no anger in her eyes, only fatigue, grief, and something else, quiet recognition. "We used to sit like this," she said. "Remember, late nights after your meetings, just not saying anything, just being there." He nodded. It was the only part of the day that ever felt real. The rain outside thickened, soft against the windows. They didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in that silence, no longer heavy, just full. Two people who had once loved, broken, disappeared, and now slowly were facing each other again, not as they had been but as they were now. Older, wiser, and maybe not entirely beyond repair. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of unspoken truths, of things they were finally brave enough to feel without turning away. Maya leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees, her hands clasped loosely. Her eyes shimmered under the soft light of the room, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You know," she said, "I used to imagine you showing up, at the door, at the hospital, even just a message. For years I'd picture what I'd say if you did." Adrian turned to her slowly, listening. "But I stopped imagining it eventually, because it hurt less to believe you wouldn't come back than to hope you would and never see you." She blinked, and a single tear slid down her cheek. "I don't need an apology," she said. I don't need you to explain the past. I've lived with it long enough. What I do need to know is—" She turned to him, her eyes locking onto his with a quiet intensity. "If I don't move toward you this time, if I don't take the next step, will you still be there? Or will you walk away again?" Adrian didn't hesitate, not even for a second. "I'll be here," he said softly. "Even if you never take another step, I'll be right here." Her breath caught, and for a moment she looked as if she were trying to hold herself together. But the crack was too deep. The tears came, slow and silent, and she didn't wipe them away. Adrian reached for her hand, gently. She let him. And then he added, "I'll wait a year, 10 years, a lifetime, whatever it takes. Just don't doubt that I will." Maya looked down at their joined hands, then back at him. And though she didn't say anything in return, her silence no longer felt like distance. It felt like a beginning. The next weekend, the weather was perfect, the kind of gentle, golden afternoon that seemed made for remembering. Adrian drove them to a quiet park just outside the city, tucked away from traffic and tourists. It was a place none of his colleagues knew, no reporters would follow. Just trees, wind, and the echoes of a time long before everything had gotten complicated. Sophie sat in the backseat, kicking her feet excitedly. "Are we having a picnic?" Adrian smiled through the rearview mirror, something like that. Maya sat beside him, glancing out the window. She recognized the road. Her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag. "You remember this place," Adrian said gently. She nodded. "It hasn't changed much." Neither had the bench by the lake, the one where they'd spent long afternoons in their 20s, legs tangled, sharing bad takeout and bigger dreams. It was still there, weathered but standing, the same way they were. They spread out a blanket near the old tree Sophie instantly decided was perfect for climbing. As she explored, Adrian and Maya sat side by side, watching the little girl dance between the shadows. And then, after a long silence, Adrian reached into his coat pocket. "I never let go of this," he said quietly. Maya turned to look and froze. In his hand was a small velvet box, worn at the edges. He opened it slowly, revealing a delicate ring with a simple, elegant design. The same ring he'd bought 6.5 years ago, just weeks before everything had fallen apart. The one he never had the chance to give her. Maya's breath caught. "You kept it?" Adrian nodded. "Through every board meeting, every time I moved apartments, every time I thought I'd never see you again, it stayed with me." He got to one knee, right there in the grass, surrounded by the laughter of their daughter and the quiet hush of trees swaying overhead. "I've spent so long chasing the wrong kind of forever," he said. "But if I get a second chance, if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life getting this right. With you, with Sophie, as a family." Maya stared at him, tears rising fast, her hand over her mouth. Sophie looked up from a few feet away, curious. "Mommy, what's happening?" Adrian looked at her too and smiled. "I'm asking your mom to marry me." Maya laughed through the tears, surprised, overwhelmed, but glowing with something she hadn't let herself feel in years: hope. And slowly she nodded. "Yes." The sun dipped low, casting long, golden streaks across the grass. The park had begun to empty, but laughter still lingered in the air, the soft kind, private and full of peace. Adrian walked on one side, Maya on the other, and between them, Sophie skipped along with a wildflower in one hand and her parents' fingers wrapped tightly in the other. No cameras, no boardrooms, no scripted speeches. Just the rhythmic crunch of gravel under their feet, the sound of birds settling in the trees, and the quiet murmur of a world finally letting them just be. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. Every few steps, Sophie would tug them closer, swinging their hands like she was conducting her own small orchestra of joy. Maya leaned into Adrian's shoulder, and he tilted his head to rest against hers for a moment, closing his eyes, breathing in the simplicity of now. They passed the old bench by the lake once more. Adrian looked at it and smiled. Maya did too. They didn't stop. They didn't need to. That chapter had closed. What mattered was the walk they were taking now, side by side with their daughter between them, anchoring them to something new. Something real. As the sky turned lavender and the last light of day spilled across the water, they kept walking, hand in hand, heart to heart. A family. Late in arriving, but whole.